get witnesses' phone numbers or identification or any contact information. So if you see a witness, just get their information so that in case you need them in the future. If they ask you to make a written statement, say, I'm happy to provide a written statement, but I want to do so after I've thought about the situation. And then the next thing to do is, call a lawyer. You may not need to hire a lawyer, you may not need a lawyer to represent you in this situation, but you want to talk to somebody that knows the law, knows the facts, and knows what's going on before you make any verbal assertions or written assertions about what happened.
You brought with you a great expert to help answer questions
We
tonight.
brought the guy that I ask questions to on a daily basis, and we brought Heath Brooks to help us out with this situation.
One of the things when you're in a car wreck, you're worried about, am I hurt? Is my car damaged? Those are the things, what am I going to do now? How am I going to pay my medical bills? How am I going to take care of my family? Those are the questions that you automatically think of when the worst case scenario happens. And one of the things that you need to be clear about at the scene is, if you can, one, make sure you're okay. If 911 needs to be called, or if you're check to make sure you're okay, very first thing you need to do. But then, if you can, and if your loved ones and if the people that you know and trust come to the scene, take photos of the scene. Make sure you get the other driver's information. Make sure that if, now we don't really write statements at the scene, at least here in our area. We used to write a lot of statements. We don't do that. But if there are witnesses, don't rely upon the police to write down the witnesses. If there's a witness, have your husband, have your brother, have your sister get the witness's name. Because down the road, after you've recovered and you're trying to fight the insurance company, it's really good to have a witness with you.
When you talked about don't take responsibility for things, don't talk too much. Insurance companies, especially Alabama, are looking for you to take any little bit of responsibility. Why is that?
Yeah, Alabama is what we call a pure contributory negligent state. So if you are at fault in any way in terms of causing your own injury, then it's an absolute bar on recovery in Alabama. So it's really one of those things that, if you could say something like, well, this was just not really anybody's fault, or I don't think you made anything wrong, those are things that can and come back to haunt you in the future. So you want to make sure that you at least, when you're talking to somebody on the record or on a recording, that you understand what you're saying and the gravity or the impact of what you might say.
And we got an email from Millie. Millie had said, my husband and I were seriously injured when a tractor trailer hit our car after he ran a stop sign. Are big rig accidents different from regular car accidents? Do we need a special lawyer to handle that kind of case? Big rig accidents, why is it different?
Well, in normal situation where, automobile, hits automobile.
Car on car.
Typically, the force that we're dealing with is a lot different. You hit something with a 18-wheeler or a tractor trailer, the force is, magnified by a lot. And you usually end up with a situation where there are worse injuries. So that's really kind of one of the things where you say, okay, look, this is a situation where I really need to talk to somebody who understands the way that these things work. The next thing that you look at are the regulations. So, normal people driving down the road, they've got to follow the rules of the road for that situation. But people that are professionals, that have CDLs, that are long-haul drivers, or drivers that are interstate drivers, they have a lot more obligation. And that's something that we deal with on a regular basis, right, Heath?
Look, here's the deal. If you're a truck driver, if you're driving a tractor trailer on the road, you've had training. You've had more training than anyone else on the road on how to operate your tractor trailer. You also have an employer. And so when you're operating a tractor trailer, the federal government has gotten involved, and they have said when you are operating a tractor trailer, you have to follow these rules. And the rules, there are hundreds of rules that a tractor trailer operator has to follow, and they've gone to school to know how to do it. And what we have found is that if there is a tractor trailer accident, oftentimes it is a failure to follow the rules. And you really need to hire an attorney who is familiar with the rules that tractor trailer drivers have to follow. Things like, did you obtain your commercial driver's license? Were you on any medication at the time of the wreck? Are you a type 1 diabetic and driving a tractor trailer? Are you certain that you have obtained your medical proof necessary every year to ensure that you are still safe to drive a tractor trailer? these tractor trailers have tracking devices on them. You have to keep up with log books. There are a whole bunch of rules that tractor trailers have to, drivers have to follow. And it's important that they follow these rules, because if they don't, people are injured, people are killed. So when this happens with a tractor trailer and a car, there's no second chances. And you really need to hire a lawyer that has handled these types of cases and that it knows how to deal with them, because the rules are important in those kinds of scenarios.
Yeah, and this kind of evidence that we can get on the front end of these cases is incredible, because some of it's electronic, some of it's just witnesses, but a lot of it is information that needs to be gathered immediately in terms of the case, because once you wait 30, 60, 90 days, it can go away. So you need to talk to somebody quickly.
We've got Charles on the line with a question. Charles, thanks for calling. What's your question tonight?
Yes, I was wondering, I was in an automobile accident on June the 3rd. I was stopped behind a minivan and a truck hit me at 45 miles an hour.
Woo.
Got back injuries and neck injuries. Wanted to know if I settle with the insurance, will I be able to leave my medical part open to where if I have to have back surgery or whatever later on down the road, the insurance can actually pay for that, or how does that work?
He's asking the right questions.
Yeah, I mean, that's the primary question that we get.
Yep.
So if you're injured on the job, workers' compensation is a no-fault insurance program through the state of Alabama that provides that you can get compensation and you can have your medical benefits left open. They're responsible to pay for your medical benefits down the road. Liability claims like car wrecks are very different than that. A lot of people talk about, I was injured on the job and they've got to pay for my benefits for the rest of my life. But in a car wreck, it's a lot different, Heath.
Yeah, once you settle a case, and this is pretty much across the board, once you settle a case and you sign a release with an insurance company, that's what that's called. When you've accepted an amount of money from an insurance company and then you sign your name at the bottom of what's called a release, you're forever prevented the opportunity to ever get anything else from that insurance company or the person who caused you injury. So what we always do, and what I always do in my practice of law, is I want to wait until you are completely cured from your injury, or at least you've reached maximum medical improvement, meaning you've gotten as good as you're going to get, before we try to resolve any sort of claim. Don't sign a release from an insurance company until you've got a good idea about what your injuries are, or until you have recovered from your injuries. Because if you do and you need surgery the next day, the insurance company's not going to pay for it. And they're not going to pay the things that you're entitled to: the pain and suffering, the mental anguish, the permanent injury, the disfigurement. Make sure not to sign a release until you talk to a lawyer.
And the insurance companies know what they're doing, don't
Well,
they?
and what they're trying to do is get you to sign in exchange for a complete release of any responsibility they have in the future.
Yeah.
And that may not be in your best interest, and a lot of times it's not. So what we want to do is, even if you're going to have future medical treatment, we want to be able to look at the situation and talk to your physicians, figure out what you're going to need in the future, so we can add that in. And even if we agree to a lump sum settlement, at least we understand what we are expecting to see in the future, as opposed to just signing off and the defendant not having any responsibility for what happens in the future.
To that end, we can determine what your future medical costs are going to be. We can look at your future, the costs of what it's going to take for your health insurance company, or the types of injuries that you can expect to still be complaining of 20 years down the road. So, and that's something that we can take account of as we're making a demand to an insurance company. So that's something you need to, like Michael said, really be cognizant of when you make your settlement.
That's why you need experienced attorneys who have seen this and know what they're advising you on. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back answering more of your questions about car and truck wrecks. Stay with us.
You're watching WAAY 31 Law Call, where lawyers come to help. Your rights, your calls, live. Hosted by family law attorney Sharon Dovian, with the personal injury attorneys of one of the Valley's most respected law firms, Timberlake & League. Featuring the knowledge of managing partner Michael Timberlake, with millions of dollars awarded to his clients. And the experience of attorney Will League, a strong courtroom fighter known for his commitment to winning. and the fellow partners of Timberlake and League Heath Brooks and William Meservey. This is WAAY 31 Law Call.
Welcome back. I'm Sharon Doviet. Tonight we're answering your questions about car and truck wrecks. We've got with us Michael Timberlake and Heath Brooks. They're both from Timberlake and League, and they are personal injury attorneys and handle these kind of cases all the time, every day. We've got callers with questions. Mac is on the line with a question. Hi, Mac. Thanks for calling. What's your question?
My wife's sister was killed in a car wreck,
Oh,
and I was wondering what effect a hospital lien would have on a settlement in a wrongful death case.
Okay, hospital lien. So
Yeah.
what even is that for folks who have never been through that?
Yeah. I mean, that's, people, we talk to people about this all the time, and sometimes they'll say, the hospital's filed a lien against my property. Well, they haven't filed a lien against your property. But there is a special statute in Alabama that allows a hospital to file a lien against a claim for personal injury that you may have arising out of a car wreck or any other kind of situation. If it's a traumatic thing, you come into the hospital shortly thereafter and they provide care, the hospital can provide a lien against a third party for compensation that you may receive as a result of that injury. That only allows the hospital to make a claim against your recovery in that case. It doesn't apply to your house, your car, your cat, your dog, your business, your bank accounts, or anything like that. It only says the hospital's got to be dealt with if you recover from a third party for that injury. So that's kind of the hospital lien situation. But in a hospital lien, they're only have a lien against claims that you could make under Alabama law. And a wrongful death claim in Alabama is a lot different than a personal injury claim, and a hospital lien may not apply.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if your wrongful death claim in the state of Alabama really is what's called punitive damages, meaning that you make a wrongful death claim and the damages that you can expect to receive is what's called the sanctity of life, which means that if a jury awards you damages or if you resolve a case under a wrongful death claim, then that is to prevent other people from taking the same action of the person that did wrong to your loved one. And so in that kind of scenario, a hospital really wouldn't have a lien against the proceeds of that wrongful death claim. The difference would be if your lawyer or if you filed a personal injury action for the compensatory damages or the pain and suffering and medical bills and things of that nature that were accrued before your loved one passed away, and then perhaps the hospital lien statute would apply there. Whenever you're dealing with a hospital lien, that's a statutory creation by the folks down in Montgomery to protect hospitals in the event that they have expended resources and expended medical care to take care of you or your loved one after an injury. Anytime a hospital is going to assert a lien against any sort of recovery, you need to talk to a lawyer, because in those kinds of scenarios, there are certain times when a hospital will assert a lien against a claim that they just don't have a lien against. And if you don't have a lawyer who can tell you the ins and outs of this particular statute, then you may pay some resources back to the hospital that you're not required to pay. So call a lawyer, talk to them anytime a hospital tries to assert any sort of a lien.
Okay. Yeah, in fact, the lien statute in Alabama specifically says that hospitals have to file on health insurance before they can assert a lien, and that's a big situation. So if you have health insurance, hospital files a lien, you need to call a lawyer.
Okay. We've got a question from Melissa. Melissa, thanks for calling. What's your question tonight?
I was hit by a Dodge Ram Dually. It was the man's work truck. I was rear-ended. His brakes supposedly failed. My medical bills with my children's exceeded the $100,000 insurance coverage he had. He took in return and put his business, all of his, everything he had as far as home, everything in his family member's name, so I couldn't recover any other damages as far as for my medical expenses or anything else. Is that legal? So what can be done about it?
That sounds sneaky. And
yeah, that's and a little, a lot of it is in technically, what can we do before we get a judgment against somebody in a situation like this? Obviously, if somebody's working well, first of all, an individual who does something wrong is responsible for their own actions, and their insurance may cover them for that. But if they are a business and they're working in the line and scope of their employment, then their business may also have some responsibility. You would hope and think that a business would have more coverage than an individual in this situation, but you can get, claims, you can make claims against both and recover from both. But if the liability limit is $100,000 and that's all you can get, then there may not be a way to try to collect anything from an individual or his business, especially if they've done something sneaky and transferred assets. But you can look to your own coverage and potentially get some coverage, right, Heath?
Well, that's true. I mean, there's an uninsured motorist. If you have an uninsured or underinsured motorist, then your insurance company can stand into the shoes of the person who caused you an injury and cover you up to the limits of the insurance that you purchased if your injuries warrant that. But one of the things that is essential to understand is that if you're in a catastrophic injury, where you're in a catastrophic situation where you've suffered a catastrophic injury because of an employee of a company, what may need to happen pretty quickly is to get into litigation or file a lawsuit, because there may be some leeway to move assets around prior to a lawsuit that's been filed. But if a lawsuit is filed, then you can no longer move those assets around if there's a potential for a recovery there. So that's something that when you get into a situation like that, you really need to talk to a lawyer to make sure that all of your bases are covered on the front end. And then if you move down the road and fortunately you have purchased uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage, perhaps your coverage can come in there and take up the slack. And that's what you hope. But if you don't have that type of coverage, or if you're dealing with a catastrophic sort of situation and you've got a person that's moving around their assets, if you've already filed a lawsuit, that's one of those things that they're not going to be able to do.
Yeah, and the other thing you can look at is if if this is a catastrophic situation and you go forward and get a judgment against this person, and then they try to claim bankruptcy, then the bankruptcy court will look back and say, hey, you made all these transfers knowing that you had this liability that was coming down the pike, and the bankruptcy court can deem those transfers to be fraudulent and really create a problem. So it's one of those things. You got to look at it from all angles, but the lawyers know how to deal with it.
Okay, we've got Renee on the line with a question. Renee, thanks for calling. What's your question tonight?
Yes, ma'am. I was involved in an accident, and I was a passenger. It was a one-vehicle accident.
Okay.
I was the only person in the vehicle that was severely injured. My back was broken in 5 different places, and I was, of course, taken to the hospital, and then I was transferred to another hospital, and I was under a doctor's care and wasn't getting any better, and therefore was advised to have surgery, and I did. And after I had surgery, openly and willingly, that doctor admitted that he made a mistake, and now my back is even worse than what it was when I had the wreck. And I don't know what to do or where to go with this, because I've lost everything. I don't know that much about the law to know what to do.
Okay, the doctor admitted a mistake.
Yeah, so one thing, you got a single vehicle crash. Those can be very difficult to recover against the driver or anybody trying to figure out how to make that happen. But if you are in a situation and you're injured and you suffer some from the negligence or the failure of a physician to do what reasonable physicians would do under those same circumstances, then you can look at pursuing a claim for medical malpractice against that doctor. Now, these claims can be difficult and they're very fact intensive. Just because you had a bad result from a situation, especially in a trauma case, doesn't mean that the doctor is automatically responsible for your injuries. We could look at the case. We'd have to prove that the doctor did something that no reasonable doctor would do in the situation, and that you are worse off as a result of what that doctor did.
Okay, we're going to take a break. Be right back, answering more of your questions about car and truck wrecks. Stay with us. If you didn't get your questions answered tonight, here's how to get in touch with Michael Timberlake and with Heath Brooks. They are with Timberlake and League personal injury attorneys. That's everything from medical malpractice to car accidents. 256-536-0770 or 800-804-2502. The website is law-injury.com. And if you like them on Facebook, you can learn more about the law that way.
All right, and Sharon W. does a great job hosting our show. She's a family law attorney in Huntsville. She is at 256-539-7337, and she has a wonderful website, and it is
SharonFamilyLaw.com. Thank you, sir.
You can look her up on the web.
You were saying single car wrecks. There's something special about single car wrecks.
Yeah, I didn't realize this. Heath reminded me. If you were in a single car wreck, you can still recover against the driver as long as you can prove that that driver was wanton or willful in their conduct. So if you're in a passenger seat and somebody's drinking, or they're speeding, or they're acting recklessly, or they're on drugs, you can recover against that driver. Or if you're in a common business interest, you can recover against the driver as well.
Go visit a lawyer if you've got questions, because they need to walk you through the whole process. Thanks for all your calls and questions tonight. See you next week.